Hi, everybody. I'm your host, Mr. Wildcat. Hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving. For those of you who are in the U.S. and for those of you who are not, hope you all have a wonderful day. Now, as many of you guys should know by now, we lost the MC Chuck Woolery over the weekend at the age of 83. Musician, game show host, talk show host. Okay, we're going to be looking at his legacy of what he's brought us the last 50, 60 years. Um, so we're going to be spewing into that. And if you guys have want to post a tribute to Woolery, you guys are more than welcome to do that. I know some of you guys have already paid a tribute to Chuck Woolery on some of my other videos. I have a long, long, long time ago when there was other game show websites that basically it was long before YouTube was such a long time before YouTube was such a thing. There would be like a couple of video clips of game shows, vintage game show clips that would pop up. And some of those would be from Chuck Woolery's Wheel of Fortune. And of course, there's at least 2 or 3 of those clips that I wind up posting on my channel. Okay, and I know some of you guys, I have received comments on those videos in recent days for those of you who wanted to pay tribute to Chuck Woolery. I do appreciate that, and please continue. And if you guys are wishing to pay tribute to Chuck Woolery, I remind you, keep your comments in the bounds of good taste. This is not the place for disrespect, especially for those of you who don't have anything nice to say about him, especially for what he's done in recent years. This is not the place for that. Okay, we're here today to look at the bright side of his life. Okay, and that's it. Okay, you have something negative to say, take it elsewhere. You have something nice to say, leave it in the comments. Okay, without ado, let's get to work. Okay. So much to cover in such little time. What do we have here? Okay. So Chuck Woolery was born on March 16th, 1941 in Ashland, Kentucky. He was known as American game show host, talk show host, actor, and musician. He had long-running tenures hosting several game shows. He was, when it comes to Wheel of Fortune, we all think about Pat Sajak and Vanna White. Okay. And of course, Ryan Seacrest, the newest guy to the game. But to hell with Ryan Seacrest, I don't. Okay, this guy wants to host. Ryan Seacrest, don't have anything nice to say about him. Okay, yes, he's done a good job carrying the torch and stuff. But okay, do we really have to give Ryan Seacrest every single job in this industry? All right. Okay, so going back to the subject, for the last 40 plus years, we were used to watching Pat Sajak and Vanna White hosting Wheel of Fortune. Well, before Pat Sajak took the job, we had Chuck Woolery, and he hosted the show from January of 1975 to December of 1981. We'll cover more about that in just a few minutes, okay? But some of the other work he has done. He'd done the original incarceration of Love Connection, which he hosted from 1983 to 1994. He also hosted an NBC daytime game show called Scrabble from 1984 to 1990, as well as a brief revival in 1993. He hosted Greed on Fox from 1999 to 2000, as well as Lingo on the Game Show Network from 2002 to 2007. He's also had a musical career, including several advertising jingles, a top 40 pop hit with the psychedelic pop duo The Avent Garde, and a number of country music releases. So, Charles Herbert Woolery, was his name was. He was the son of Catherine, who was a homemaker, and Dan Woolery, who owned a fountain supplies company. Okay. After he graduated from high school, Chuck served 2 years in the U.S. Navy aboard the USS Enterprise CVN-65. In 1963, Woolery worked as a wine consultant for Wasserstrom Wine and Import Company in Columbus, Ohio. And forgive me if I butchered that phrase, okay? So basically, let's talk about his music career. This is the first part of his success, okay? So, Woolery, during the early 1960s, Woolery sang and he played the double bass with a folk song trio called the Bordermen. He also sang in a duo called the Avent Garde, who were in the psychedelic pop genre. The other half of the duo was Bubba Fowler. They signed to Columbia Records and had a top 40 hit with the song Naturally Stoned in 1968, bringing the duo one-hit wonder status. It reached number 30 in Canada on October 21st, 1968. As a solo artist, Woolery released 5 records with Columbia Records. After 1970, he signed with RCA and released Forgive My Heart in 1971. Another single called Love Me failed to make any impact. He then turned to acting. Okay. In the late 1970s, Woolery returned to his singing career. Woolery charted on hot country songs with Painted Lady and The Greatest Love Affair. Between 1977 and 1980, Woolery recorded for Warner Bros. Records and Epic Records as a solo artist, with 2 low-charting singles on hot country songs. Woolery also co-wrote The Joys of Being a Woman on Tammy Wynette's 1971 album, We Sure Can Love Each Other. Okay? Now, bear with me, guys, because I have the original Naturally Stoned song that basically this is the song that made him a huge success. And I know that some of you guys have many of you guys have probably never heard this before. Some of you guys have. Okay, whether you watched the GSN reality show that started Chuck Woolery 20 years ago, we'll talk about that in a little bit. It was also named Chuck Woolery Naturally Stoned. It comes from this song right here. I'm not sure if we're able to get this on here, and I'm not going to play the entire thing primarily because we're not. I don't want to get slapped with the copyright infringement. Okay, so we'll play just a little bit. Okay. Without you, I can get a good vibration in my mind, don't feel alone. I get a real sensation, feel like I'm naturally stoned. Naturally stoned. All right. There's okay. So that song right there, that made Chuck Woolery a household name. Okay. He had a one-hit wonder, and basically he had not sung that in such a long, long time. Okay. So he started off as a musical performer. Now we get to so basically in the early 1970s he wound up doing some acting on television. And in the mid 1970s he did a film called The Treasure of Jamaica Reef. Okay, it's American television. Released in 1975, running 96 minutes long. There's not really. It's known to some people as Evil in the Deep. Okay, there's not really much to go off of on this, but he wound up co-starring with Stephen Boyd, who was best known for playing Masala on the 1959 film Ben-Hur. Also starring Rosie Greer, who American football player, bodyguard, actor, singer, and Cheryl Ladd, who was best known for starring in Charlie's Angels, replacing Farrah Fawcett's character. Okay. He also starred as Mr. Dingle in the children's television series New Zoo Review in the early 1970s. So that show ran from 1972 to 1977. His character was Mr. Dingle in season 1. Okay, he wound up starring in season 1 of that as Mr. Dingle. And Mr. Dingle was basically a friendly elderly postman who is also a shopkeeper and a jack of all trades. Jack of all trades, basically for those of you who do not understand, is a figure of speech used in reference to a person who has dabbed in many skills rather than gaining expertise by focusing on only one. The original version of Jack of all trades is often used as a complaint for a person who is good at fixing things and has a good level of broad knowledge. They may be a master of integration, an individual who knows enough from many learned trades and skills to be able to bring the disciplines together in a practical manner. The person is a generalist rather than a specialist. Okay? So, Chuck Woolery's first introduction to game shows was in 1974 when he was a contestant on the show. I don't know if it was a contestant or something. So, Tattletales, for those who don't know, it's a game show that aired on CBS daytime from 1974 to 78, and again in the 1980s from 82 to 84, in which basically you had three celebrity couples who were married to other celebrities at the time. Basically, each of them represented a third of the studio audience, and basically you have like the husbands that would be up on this, that would have a seat at the podium in front of the studio audience, while their wives would be in a secluded room off stage with headphones. And basically, the host, Bert Convey, would ask questions about their personal lives or something. Okay, it's called the Game of Celebrity Gossip. Everyone in this arena has a money stake in one of our famous couples as we play the game of celebrity gossip, Tattletales. And here is the host of Tattletales, Bert Convey. Yeah, I actually make a good MC myself. But anyway, Chuck Woolery, he appeared on the show in the 1970s with his then wife, Joanne Flug. Now, one thing I should mention to you is that Chuck Woolery was married numerous times throughout his life. Okay, he was married, I believe, to like 4 or 5 different women. Okay, and we'll hopefully confirm that later on in the show. But basically, he started the show Tattletales. It's in 1974. He probably appeared a few more times throughout the show's run. He divorced Joanne Flug back in 1980. Okay. The details we won't go into that because it's not a pleasant thing. But when you take a look at his appearance on Tattletales, you take a look at his musical work. It inspired Merv Griffin to hire Chuck Woolery on as a host of a new game show he was putting together called Wheel of Fortune. Now, technically, it started off as Shopper's Bazaar, which it was, okay, they did a pilot with Chuck Woolery, and then they did another one with Ed Cookie Burns from 77 Sunstrip. Or for those of you who are Married Children fanatics, okay, you know Ed Cookie Burns. He made a guest appearance in season 6 of Married Children called My Dinner with Anthrax. Cookie, lend me your comb. But basically, yeah, that's the same Ed Cookie Burns who did it. He did a pilot for that. Chuck Woolery won Merv Griffin's interest, so he was asked to do it. He was offered the job, and Chuck Woolery he originally turned it down because he didn't want to be. He hated game shows. Okay, one thing he said about when he was first offered a role of the game show host is, game show hosts have to be dressed in checkered suits and they have to act like car salesmen and stuff like that. And he didn't feel comfortable with that type of matter. It wasn't until his agents and the NBC network, one of these NBC network executives, they will all approach him saying, "You have no job, you have no money. Why are you being so ignorant about this?" And even though he was originally offered 13 weeks with Wheel of Fortune, Lynn Boland, who was one of the head wigs of NBC Daytime at the time, approached him and says, "Well, I'll make a deal with you. Jeopardy is being canceled. Okay, we're revamping the network. Jeopardy, which has been on the air for about 11 years, is going to be getting canceled at the end of 1974. And apparently, Merv Griffin still has a contract with the network for another year. So here's the deal. I'm willing to give you a year's contract with Wheel of Fortune." And at that point, I said he pretty much accepted. Wheel of Fortune with Chuck Woolery first premiered on January 6, 1975. Okay, apparently Merv Griffin had also seen Chuck Woolery perform on the Tonight Show, which is what he basically gained his interest on. Okay, so Chuck Woolery's Wheel of Fortune was a little bit. It's the game. Some of the gameplay is still the same as today, but the formatting was a little bit it's kind of like a brand new, a completely different set. Of course, you had a different letter turner. You didn't have Vanna White was still like a teenager or something, or in high school when Wheel of Fortune first hit the air. So of course she's not going to be hosting the show right off the top of the head. You had this lady, Susan Stafford. Okay, let me see if I can get some interesting facts on her. Susan Stafford, by the way, is still alive. All right, so Susan Stafford. Susan Stafford was born January 27, 1944. She is an American former model, actress, and television host. Hosted Wheel of Fortune from January 6, 1975 until October 22nd, 1982. Okay. She basically, let's see, she was married to Gordon McLendon, who at the time was nicknamed the Maverick of Radio. Okay. And then she was also married to Dick Ambersall, who was an American television executive and senior advisor for NBC Universal Sports and Olympics. Okay. Now, of course, this was only from 1976 to 1981. All right. And because of her connections and stuff, she landed herself the hostess job on Wheel of Fortune. So her job was the original Vanna White, which basically to turn the letters. Okay. All right, you talked me into it. Give me 1 second. All right. All right, here we go. Look at this studio, filled with exciting prizes, fabulous and exciting merchandise. Just wait to be won today on Wheel of Fortune, including a trip for two to Montreal, Canada, a set of golf clubs, a fabulous pair of skis, and this luxury diamond ring. Over $69,000 just waiting to be won. And now, here is the star of Wheel of Fortune, Chuck Woolery. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Wheel of Fortune. And now let's give a wonderful applause to our wonderful hostess, Susan Stanford. And then Susan comes out in the set. Okay? So basically, he introduces the contestants, and he gives one big spin of the wheel, and he says, top dollar value in the first round of $750. Watch out for that black spot bankrupt, because if you land on that, you lose your cash but not your merchandise, because once you buy a prize, it is yours to keep. So we'll talk about that in just a second. So that's okay. So basically, the gameplay was still the normal. Like you basically were given a puzzle. You spin the wheel. You land on a dollar value, and you guess a consonant on the board. Now, for example, you land on $350. You guess a T, and there's 4 of them on the board. There's 4 T. Okay, $350. T! Yes, there are 4 T's. Ding, 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 ding. Okay. Now, $350 for each of those 4 T's. Okay. And as long as you kept guessing letters without hitting bankrupt or lose a turn, then you got to keep spinning the wheel. But if you guessed a letter that wasn't on the board, no, I'm sorry, there is no X. Okay, Stacy, it is your turn. Okay. Once you hit $250 in your bank, it gives you an opportunity to buy a vowel. Now, I'd like to buy a vowel, please. An E? Yes, there are 2 E's. Ding, ding. Now, $250. Now, when you buy a vowel on Wheel of Fortune, okay, it's not $250 for each. If there's like multiple, if you bought an E and there was 2 E's on there, it's not $250 for each of those 2 E's. It was $250 for the E for that vowel altogether. So if you had 2 E's, it only cost you $250. Whether it was 2 E's, 1 E, 5 E's, or no E's at all, it was still $250. But the worst part is if you bought the vowel and it was not on the board, then you not only lost the $250, but you also lost your turn. No, I'm sorry, there's no E. Okay, Jessica, it is your turn. Spin the wheel, okay? The first contestant to successfully solve the puzzle, they got to take the money that they'd accumulated throughout the round, and they got to redeem it for a bunch of prizes on the set. So they usually focus on one section of the set at a time for each round and stuff. So basically, you had money. You basically were having to um, redeem it for a prize on the board. Okay, and apparently the contestants they had, in order to help them out, there was on the side of the set. You basically had a list of prizes and its dollar value to help you go a little quicker. Because the faster you can buy your prizes, the better chance you have of playing an additional round of Wheel. Now, okay, depending on how long it takes to solve one particular puzzle and how fast it takes the contestants to buy the prizes determines exactly how many rounds of Wheel of Fortune to get to be played. There's always at least 3, but sometimes if the puzzles get solved a little quickly or the prizes were bought a little faster than usual, they can squeeze in a 4th or possibly a 5th round of Wheel of Fortune. Okay? And mark my word, during the Chuck Woolery era, there was no bonus round. When the time ran out, okay, that sound means the time was running out, so I'm going to get the wheel final spin. I'm going to ask you to give me a letter in the puzzle. You have 5 seconds to solve. Vowels are worth nothing. Consonants will be worth $750. Okay, and person is the category. Okay, so basically, as long as you had money, you had to keep buying prizes, and as soon as you made it to a certain amount of money, like even if suppose you had like $217 left, you didn't see anything up there that was interested in you, but there were prizes up there that cost you had to buy them. Okay, and I know on the Pat Sajak version during his first few years, there'd be like crappy prizes like a ceramic Dalmatian as one. There was also like a goldfish or something. And I know that the goldfish on the daytime Wheel of Fortune, like nobody bought it. So some of these prizes were so bad on the daytime Wheel of Fortune, nobody wanted to buy them. So what they did was they wound up giving them to other shows, like Sale of the Century, in which they tried to give it away as prize of their own. And I can tell you, okay. For $750, I'll take the trip for 2 to Palm Springs. Okay, leaves you with $75. Oh dear God. For $49, I'll take the candy dish. Okay, and that leaves you with $26. You want that in an account or gift certificate? I'll take a gift certificate, please. So once you ran out of money or you didn't have enough money left to buy any prize on the set, you had the option between either putting that remaining money on account or put on a gift certificate. 99% of the contestants, or 99% of the time, the contestants would put it on a gift certificate, okay? In which they got to use that gift certificate towards one of their selected vendors. They got to a selected prize from a selected vendor or something like that, okay? Now, it's very rare for contestants to put money on account. Every time they had to put money on account, the host had to remind the contestants and the audience and the home viewers how it works. So basically, if you put the money on account, you had to solve another puzzle without hitting bankrupt in order to use that money. And if you hit bankrupt or you fail to solve another puzzle, that you missed out on that money. Okay? Yeah, no, there were some really good prizes on the board, and there were some really crappy ones. Okay, so then at the end of the show, like whoever had the highest score, they got to come back. They didn't get to go to a bonus round or anything. They got to come back on the next show and defend their championship. And I think they were allowed up to 5 appearances on the show. So now, like NBC, you either had they had a choice between either 5 appearances or $30,000. Okay, was the most that you could do, and then they set these. They put limits in place in response to the 1950s quiz show scandals, which basically you had contestants to stay in the show for a long periods of time. They ranked up a lot of money and stuff like that. You had a whole bunch of standards of practices that were put in place after those scandals had broken out. Okay, so that was Wheel of Fortune in a nutshell. Okay, I'm sorry it took so long to go over that, but basically, um, so Wheel of Fortune, when it first premiered, it actually hit. They did very well in the ratings. And at one point, literally half the country was watching the show, and it was at another point, another part of the time, it was going up in direct competition with the first half of The Price is Right with Bob Barker. Okay, and in fact, okay, speaking of The Price is Right, The Price is Right in 1975. They experimented with an hour-long format. They decided to take the show, which was only 30 minutes during its first 3 years of the Bob Barker era. They decided to expand it to a 60-minute version, and it did so well, they kept it on as a permanent thing. Well, Price is Right did so well with it, Wheel of Fortune tried to do it. It didn't do as well. Okay? So they inadvertently went back to 30 minutes a time. Okay? Wheel of Fortune did very well, in fact, okay, throughout the remainder of the 1970s. Okay? Now, by the time we hit 1980, um, trouble almost came to. There was some trouble that did come afloat to the Wheel of Fortune set. Now, apparently, or NBC, that is. NBC, they were doing they wanted to do a daytime talk show with a then unheard of host named David Letterman. Okay, he was an unknown comedian at the time who would eventually go on to be a huge star in late night television. Okay, so they wanted to they wanted to create a 90-minute version of a daytime talk show called the David Letterman Show. And in order to make room for this 90-minute show, NBC had to cancel 3 game shows off their. They had to cancel 3 game shows from their lineup. Okay, on the chopping block was the Peter Marshall version of the Hollywood Squares, which had been on the air for 14 years. High Rollers with Alex Trebek, only been on the air for 2 years. And the third one was Wheel of Fortune with Chuck Woolery, which had been on the air for 5.5 years. Okay, so it looked like Wheel of Fortune was about to get the chopping block. Okay, not so fast. At the very last minute, Wheel of Fortune they were able to work a deal to that they basically decided to cut back on Letterman's talk show, and instead of doing the 90-minute version that they originally signed to, they cut it back to 60 minutes. And in return, they got to spare one of those 3 game shows that was given the X. And you know what was spared? Wheel of Fortune. Okay? So, but of course, Wheel of Fortune, Chuck Woolery, everybody stayed on the show except for the show's announcer. And the reason why was because at the time that they canceled, Charlie O'Donnell, who was the original announcer of Wheel of Fortune, he wound up having to find other. He wound up having to go find other work. And during that time, between the time the show was canceled to the time the show was picked back up, Charlie O'Donnell had already signed a new job being the announcer for all of the Jack Barry, Dan Enright game shows. And unfortunately, he was not able to get out of the deal. So that would basically give Charlie O'Donnell the announcing gigs for all of the Barry Enright shows, such as Tic Tac Toe, The Joker's Wild, Bullseye, Play the Percentages, and I think in 1984 they would do a show called Hot Potato on NBC Daytime. He would do that as well. There was a few other things too, but he would be the prime announcer for all of the Barry Enright shows. So they wound up having to go out and find a new announcer, Jack Clark. He would be on the show until his passing in 1988. And he did a very good job being a replacement too. So you saw a change of announcing during the time. Now, in 1981, Chuck Woolery's contract was up for renewal. And of course, this is one of the things that when Chuck Woolery looks back at his life, this is one of those few things that he actually regrets doing. Okay, one of his biggest regrets in life was basically leaving Wheel of Fortune. Okay, And the reason why he left Wheel of Fortune was because his contract was up for renewal. Let me read to you exactly what it reads on Wikipedia. I'm going to tell you right now. There are two different versions of the story that I have heard throughout the last 20 years. Okay? And I'm not sure which one is right, but it does involve, both stories do involve a pay dispute between Woolery and Merv Griffin. Okay? So let me read to you exactly what it said on Chuck Woolery's Wikipedia article. In 1981, he was involved in a salary dispute with the program's producers. He said in a 2007 interview that he demanded a raise from $65,000 a year to about $500,000 a year because the program was drawing a 44 viewership share at the time, and other hosts such as Richard Dawson from Family Feud and Bob Barker from The Price is Right were making that much. Griffin offered Woolery $400,000 a year, while NBC offered to pay the additional $100,000. But after Merv Griffin threatened to move the show over to CBS, NBC withdrew their offer. Woolery's contract was not renewed, and his final episode aired on December 25th, 1981. He would later be replaced by Pat Sajak. Now, they're leaving the show. Now, here's where the two different things come into play. One says, Chuck Woolery says, I'm not interested, I quit. Another version says, oh yeah, you're fired. Okay? So I don't know which one of them is true, but Chuck Woolery was on his way out the door. And that's what paved the way for Pat Sajak to host Wheel of Fortune. Pat Sajak was, at the time, the weatherman for KNBC, the local NBC affiliate out in Los Angeles. And Merv Griffin liked his personality. So when Merv Griffin pitched Pat Sajak to NBC for being the new host for Wheel of Fortune, NBC originally barked at it because, oh, Pat Sajak, you hired him. Wasn't he the local weatherman here in LA? He's too local. I don't think there's any way there's no way in hell he's going to pick up nationally, and we're not interested in him. Okay? Merv Griffin responds, oh yeah? Well, this is the guy I want. Here's the deal. You hire this man to replace Chuck Woolery, or I'm going to take my show to another network. How about that? Okay, you win. Okay? NBC was willing to do anything. And basically, back in that day, NBC was willing to do anything to keep its highly rated programs on the air. Okay? As far as they were willing to, they could afford to give to do the $100,000 difference for Chuck Woolery if they wanted to. They were willing to give Merv Griffin anything he wanted, and it's because NBC was on the verge of bankruptcy. Okay, in the late 1970s, NBC had invested in a shitload of high budgeted programming that did not deliver on ratings, so they lost a lot of money on that. But the one thing that came very close to killing the network was the 1980 Summer Olympic boycott. Okay, the 1980 NBC had won the rights a few years prior to broadcast the 1980 Summer Olympics in Moscow. But when Jimmy Carter came out in his State of the Union address, demanding that the U.S. not participate in the Summer Olympics, NBC was not allowed to televise the games, and they literally lost over $300 million in advertising revenue. Okay, well they spent $300 million getting the TV rights to it, and with the games not being televised, they lost all that. They lost all the money. Okay, they couldn't get the money back, and the one thing that ultimately saved the network, okay, aside from Johnny Carson's Tonight Show, which at the time was bringing in literally half the network's revenue. Okay, and that was the other program. They were going to do anything they could to keep him. NBC was willing to keep Johnny Carson no matter what the cost or what the demand, because he was so valuable to the network. Okay, and then they had a wide variety of programs that came out throughout the 80s that wind up saving the show. You had Hill Street Blues, you had Miami Vice, you had St. Elsewhere, you had Cheers and The Cosby Show. These shows would, throughout the entire early 80s, in the mid 80s, would eventually lead NBC to huge success by the end of the decade. Okay, so Chuck Woolery was he regretted leaving Wheel of Fortune because not only did he miss out on the future success the show would pick up about a year and a half later when it went into nighttime syndication, but also by the same time, Chuck Woolery was literally broke, and he had to pick up something to keep himself going. So this is where his next line of work comes into play. Love Connection. Okay. Welcome to Love Connection, where old-fashioned romance meets modern-day technology, where you get all the intimate details of a first date. And now, here is the host of Love Connection, Chuck Woolery. So, a lot of people are debating whether or not Love Connection is an actual game show or not. Okay, after all, this program actually aired on the Game Show Network, for crying out loud. Are you effing kidding me? All right, but I'll tell you a little bit how the show worked. It was a little confusing for me watching it 20 years ago, but I finally got a hang of it. So you had a contestant that would come out. It was a guy or a girl, and they were presented. They were looking for a date. Okay, so they were presented with three dating videos from three different individuals. So if it was a male contestant, they were given three ladies. They were given three different ladies, or the dating videos for three different ladies. Okay. Or if it was a female contestant, they would get three videos from three different guys. Okay. And they showed a brief clip of each of those videos to the audience and the home viewers to introduce like who these people were. And then the audience, they got to vote on who they thought the contestant picked to go on a date with. Okay. And once the voting was done, the contestant revealed who they went on a date with. And then Chuck Woolery wound up interviewing both the contestant and their date to see how that date actually went. Okay. And then after a couple, many of those encounters, they went very well. Others, of course, did not go very well. And then after a few minutes of interviewing, they basically Chuck Woolery would reveal to the audience and the home viewers exactly how the audience voted. Okay. If majority of the audience voted for the same person that the contestant selected for their date, then Chuck Woolery offered to fully pay to send both of them on a second date, all expenses paid, of course. Okay. If they agreed, okay, vote in blessing, and if they decide not to, oh well, at least we tried. Okay. Now, if they did not pick, and of course the audience did not select the right one, they have the opportunity to, they still have the opportunity to go on a second date, but it would not be covered by the staff. So let me go. Let me read to you exactly from the Love Connection article. Okay. Love Connection's premise was to arrange dates for couples. A guest appeared on the show after going on a date with one of three contestants having chosen on the basis of the contestants' videotape profiles. After the date, the televised appearance was scheduled. Love Connection tapings took place before a live studio audience. Woolery introduced the guest and the show experts from the three candidates' videos. The studio audience then secretly voted on which candidate they preferred for the guest. The guest then revealed whom he or she had actually dated, and the date joined the conversation from backstage via closed-circuit television camera. Woolery led the guest and date to discuss their time together. If they both agreed that the date had been successful, the couple would be reunited on stage. Otherwise, the date's participation in the show ended. Woolery then revealed the vote result. If the guest had a successful date with the vote winner, Woolery congratulated the couple for making a love connection. And they would usually, but not always, accept the offered prize of a second date at the show's expense. After a successful date, the guest was always offered another date with that person. However, if the vote winner was one of the other contestants, the guest could choose a date with the vote winner, regardless of the success of the first date. In addition, if the guest had already unsuccessfully dated the audience pick, the guest could choose to go on a date with either of the other contestants. If a second date took place, the couple would be invited back for a second interview at a later taping. 2 or 3 segments usually aired per episode or per show, and these were 30-minute episodes, by the way. In a variation that aired on Fridays, a bachelor or spinster who had not yet chosen a date made an appearance and allowed the studio audience to make the choice for him or her, based on video excerpts. The couple would report back in the usual fashion several weeks later. If the couple hit it off, they were entitled to a second date at the show's expense. If not, the contestant could choose between the 2 losing candidates for the show's second date. Okay. Now, this show is okay. Not only is this Chuck Woolery's longest running project, okay, he did the show for 11 years in syndication, of course, but he also developed his signature catchphrase, 2 and 2. Okay. So, Woolery created this phrase, "We'll be back in 2 and 2," on Love Connection, often accompanied by a 2-fingered hand gesture. The line referred to the fact that the program would return in 2 minutes and 2 seconds, the total length of a standard commercial break at the time, including the fade in and fade out and fade ins, bookending each break. Woolery would later use the catchphrase on other shows he hosted as well. Well, I'm sorry, we're going to make a Love Connection, but we'll try to make another one when we come back in 2 and 2. Don't go away. Jesus Christ. Yeah, you can. You know, I have not watched a show in over 20 years, and I can still hum that theme. And I can still memorize the introduction to that thing. Yeah. Mr. Wildcat truly has no life. Moving on. Love Connection would rerun on the USA Network from October 1995 through June of 1997. The Game Show Network would pick it up from January 2003 through July 2008. Beginning November 2009, the Woolery episodes returned to Game Show Network's weekday lineup, but have since been removed. Pat Bullard version has not aired since its cancellation. Game TV will start airing the Chuck Woolery season in March of 2020. Only a few episodes have aired on there since. Okay, so let's see. Okay. So that's Love Connection in a nutshell. All right. During the same time, okay, during a greater part of the time that he was doing Love Connection, he was also doing another game show for NBC Daytime called Scrabble. Okay, based on the famous board game. Okay, so let's go back to that. Okay. Now this is a show that I really have not seen. So I really can't, I really don't, I have not, this is before my time, okay? This show premiered before I was born, and I was still in diapers when the show left the air. So it goes to show you, like, how little I was, and I never really had a chance to watch the episode, but I did have a chance to watch a few, like an episode or two here or there. So basically, you solved words going up across or up and down, and you were given a clue to go with it. And then contestants at a time, you had like tiles. You could pick 2 at a time. I'll take tile number 6 and tile number 4, and you had those letters to choose from. Okay, you could pick the letter. If it's placed in there, you could have the chance to solve it, or if it wasn't in there, it was considered a stopper, and the control went over to the next contestant. And of course, the first contestant to solve it, they got a point. And the first of 3 points won the match, and they got to go to the sprint round. And they basically played two matches throughout the game. First, the winner of the first match, they went to the sprint, and the sprint round went from 0 seconds on up, and basically, you each time you answered incorrectly, you want adding 10 seconds to your time. Okay, the goal was to do it in as little time as possible because the winner of the second match, they had to beat your. They started with your time, and they ticked all the way down to 0. And if they were able to beat your, they were to get all the words solved before the time hit 0. Then they won the jackpot for the day, which I think was $5,000, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. But basically, that's what it was like. You basically get those solve words on a puzzle. Okay. There were some. Okay. There are, of course, a couple of huge bloopers and stuff that have appeared on Scrabble. Okay. On which Chuck Woolery is not too happy of. Okay. There are some notorious ones. So, like, one of them was Christmas of 19. I think it was this Christmas of 1984, I believe. Okay. He asked this contestant Aaron, I believe, "Did you get what you wanted for Christmas?" No, considering I'm Jewish. Oh, did you get what you wanted for? You know, I was ready to skim over that, but I got to give you credit, Jason Aaron. Yeah. What did you get for Hanukkah? Nothing yet. It's not the time of year yet, Chuck. Okay. Another clip. Okay. Okay, welcome back to Scrabble. Let's recap the scores, or recap them, actually. Did I really say that? Okay, and then there's another clip. The contestant, this is a big one on the East Coast, or something like that. Okay, of course, the word was apple. Okay, the contestant, they picked 2 tiles, and of course, they were both peas. A P and a P. Oh, I think I'll have to take a P. Okay. You know, like going pee-pee in the toilet. Oh, I think I'll have to take a pee. But then, of course, I think the most notorious moment on Scrabble was when these 2 contestants were having the hardest time trying to guess the word mosquitoes. The clue was they like to fly over nudist camps. And of course, in this particular part of the show's format, okay, and I don't know if this was early on or later on or whatever, but during this particular time of the show's history, you had to solve it. You just didn't say like mosquitoes. You actually had to spell the word out. And of course, they couldn't spell it. Okay. And by the time they were all done with this, Chuck Woolery looks at the camera and says, "I'm going home. I don't know about you." Okay. Now, in early 2000s, 2002, 2003 to be exact, NBC wound up doing these random TV specials called The Most Outrageous Game Show Moments, and they did 5 episodes of this special, and each one was labeled Most Outrageous Game Show Moments. The original one was called just The Most Outrageous Game Show Moments, and then the sequels would be like Most Outrageous Game Show Moments 2, and then 3, 4, and 5. The first one was hosted by 5 different game show MCs. You had Bob Eubanks from the Newlywed Game, Jim Lane from the Dating Game, you had Peter Marshall from the Hollywood Squares, Wade Martindale from Tic Tac Toe, and Ben Stein from Win Ben Stein's Money. And they wound up airing a random, basically what they did is they aired a wide variety of random game show bloopers from a wide variety of game shows that have aired throughout the years. And of course, the one game show they could not to do clips from was The Price is Right, because they didn't have the rights to it. All right. If you had the rights to The Price is Right, you could have easily squeezed in a 6th or 7th special. Okay. So that aired in 2002. 2003, and February of 2003 to be exact, they came out with episodes 2 and 3, which were hosted just by Bob Eubanks by himself. Instead of it being filmed in a theme park, they filmed it in a shopping mall. Okay, like they would do a wide variety of clips, and then in between different segments, the host would basically sit there and they'd have a little spiel, and then every so often they would play interactive games with bygoers and stuff. They would play like they would have them guess like particular, ask them like questions or have them guess a particular individual, and then they would show like the best and worst answers of those bunch. Okay. Now the reason why I'm bringing this up is because when it came time to do a fourth and fifth installment of the most outrageous game show moments in May of 2003, Chuck Woolery was brought in to be the co-host of these shows, and there was a huge segment. There was a specific segment in that fourth special that basically showed all of some of the most embarrassing moments that Chuck Woolery had done during his career, and of course, most of those moments except for one was from Scrabble, and of course, those ones that I had mentioned before. Okay, so let's see. Chuck Woolery also did a couple of other miscellaneous shows. He did The Big Spin in 1985. It was California Lottery's first television game show. So this was there was a couple of game shows based on the lottery system. So you had Big Spin that was based on the California Lottery, and then you had Powerball, the game show that aired in the early 2000s with Bob Eubanks was the host of that, and then they did another version that would be hosted by Todd Newton. The Bob Eubanks version aired in Arizona, while the Todd Newton did not. Okay. And there's also another one called New York Wired that aired in the late 90s that aired in New York State. And I actually love that one. There's an episode or two of them that are there's a couple of episodes that are circulating somewhere on YouTube. Okay. So he also did Home and Family, which was a daytime talk show in 1996 on the Family Network, and it basically was canceled in 1998. He also did a revival of The Dating Game, okay, from 1997 to 1999. I believe this one was this was syndicated. Okay. So let's see. There's not much. I can't really discuss much about this because, oops. Oh. For the first season of the 96 revival, a different format was used. Notable change was that the prospective bachelorette knew the first names of the three contestants at all times. Okay. So, well, apparently it was not the same as the Jim Lane version, but basically, the Dating Game, for those of you who do not know, it's a legendary game show that started off in the mid-1960s by Chuck Barris, and basically you had a guy or a girl that would come on the set looking for a date. A guy would come on with three bachelorettes that would be hidden. You can interact, you could talk to them, but you couldn't see them. Okay, you asked them random questions and stuff. Oh my god! You'd be surprised how many outrageous moments from the Dating Game that came out of the Dating Game. There's nothing that came out of the Chuck Woolery era, but there's a shitload that came out of the Jim Lane version. Probably my most favorite one of them all was, just to name one, Bachelor number 1. I'm a dress designer. My fitting model is out, and the deadline is drawing near. Would you want to get into my dress? Baby, I want to get your dress, your pants, and anything else you desire. Watch out, okay? Yeah. That would... I definitely tell you that's definitely a show my parents would never let me watch when I was growing up. Okay, even though the Game Show Network rarely showed that program when I was in high school, I'm guaranteed they would never let me watch it. Hell, they had a hard time letting me watch the Newlywed Game, and that was another raunchy show too. Cuckoo, 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 cuckoo. Okay, moving on. So, 1999, he came on to another game show called Greed. Okay, now let me set the background for you. In 1998, the United Kingdom, they launched a worldwide phenomenon with this new quiz show called Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and where one contestant in one night could win $1 million. Okay, or in the United Kingdom's fashion, £1 million. It It was such a huge phenomenon in the UK that there were other countries that wanted to air that show in their own countries. So I believe it was ITV in the United Kingdom, if I'm not mistaken. They sold international versions of the show to other networks. ABC got the rights to a US version of that show. And they wind up hiring Regis Philbin from Live with Regis and Kathy Lee, okay, to do the show. And that brought in such huge ratings that they wound up airing the show every day for 3 weeks in a row as a test run. And it drew so huge ratings that they decided to bring it back permanently, and they were airing it like 3-4 nights a week. And it was bringing in and it was killing everything else in the ratings. Okay. When the other networks started seeing this, they wanted in on them. They wanted on this too. So all these other networks started bringing in. They wind up doing their own versions. So basically, you had NBC that revived their controversial 21 game show with Maury Povich as their host, or as what the game show network would say, Connie Chun's husband. So I remember when the game show network was pitching Greed. When the game show network was pitching reruns for 21 when they got the rights to it in 2003. On what game show will you see soundproof booths, an in-house orchestra, Connie Chun's husband, and big cash payoffs? Do not ask me how I remember. This is 21 years ago. Do not ask me how I memorized that. But they said Connie Chun's husband. And yes, he was married to Connie Chun. Okay. 21 only lasted 19 episodes. Okay. But it was one of the more successful ones of them all. So NBC did 21 with Maury Povich. CBS opted for a quiz show from the United Kingdom called Winning Lines. They originally wanted Geraldo Rivera. He passed on it, and they wanted going with Dick Clark, who was one of the executive producers, of course. So he wound up doing the show. That show only lasted 10 episodes. Okay, so that was the least successful of them all. And I just watched an episode of Winning Lines earlier before going on the air here. I said, wow, okay. The bonus, Winning Lines is the only show that actually went 30 minutes. The other ones went an hour, okay? And Winning Lines had this bonus. And another thing about Winning Lines is not only is it just a 30-minute show, but they also crammed the whole show into 30 minutes. It didn't spew over, it didn't stop in the middle of a game when time ran out and they would continue another show out. It was all spilled into one show. And then the one contestant, they started with 49 contestants, then they went down to 6, and then they finished with 1. And that one contestant, they had this wonder wall. If you could get 20 questions correctly within 3 minutes time without striking out, you could win $1 million. Okay? That was a pretty intense bonus round. But at the same time, I can understand why that show only lasted 10 episodes. Okay? Then, of course, we had the most successful competitor of all, which was Greed, which was done by Dick Clark Productions, and it was it was a brand new concept. Like, it was not brought in from the United Kingdom. It was not a revival of something or whatever, but instead it was considered like a cheap it was like a cheesy knockoff of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire that had a different tune to it, okay? Where one contestant one night could win over $2 million, okay? And of course, they originally this show ran for 44 episodes between late 1999 and the summer of 2000. And they originally wanted Phil Donahue to host this show. Phil Donahue passed on it for 2 reasons. Number one, he had just got done hosting a 29-year talk show on daytime syndication. And he wanted to be remembered for as a talk show host, not a game show host. And number 2, the show was on Fox. He didn't want a paycheck from Fox. All right. Now, of course, it's back in the day when Fox was still extremely conservative, and you know how far left Phil Donahue was. So he did not want. Like, you have a far left extremist that did not want a paycheck. Like, now, of course, if he had squandered all his money during his 29 years in the show, which he obviously didn't, if he had squandered all his money and he needed the work, he'd probably have a different tune. He said, "Yes, I'll do it because I need the money." But he must have done really well with it. He must have made really good money during his talk show, right? And he managed it very well for him to be able to pass on a show like Greed. Okay, they wound up going with Chuck Woolery, and Chuck Woolery did such a good job with it too. So this is the next show that Chuck Woolery wound up hosting. American television game show that aired on Fox for one season. It was the show's he was the show. Chuck Woolery was the show's host, while Mark Thompson was the announcer. The series format consisted of a team of contestants who answered to set of up to 8 multiple choice questions. The first 4 contain one right answer, and the second set contains 4 correct answers, for a potential prize of $2 million, which by 2023 standards would be equivalent to $3.658 million. Dick Clark and Bob Bowden of Dick Clark Productions created the series in response to the success of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Production was rushed in an effort to launch the show before Millionaire's new season, and the show premiered less than 2 months after it was initially pitched. A pilot episode was emitted, and Fox aired its first episode on November 4th, 1999. While its Nielsen ratings were not quite as successful as Millionaire, Greed still improved on Fox's performance year to year in its time slots. The show's critical reception was mixed. Some critics saw it as a ripoff of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, while others believed Greed was the more intriguing and dramatic of the two programs. Its final episode aired on July 14, 2000, and Greed was abruptly canceled following the conclusion of its first season, as Fox's leadership shifted the network's focus to script programming. The top prize was never awarded. Only one contestant advanced to the 8th and final question, failing to win the prize. Okay? So basically how it worked is you start off with 6 contestants, and they went to a qualifying question requiring a numerical answer. The 5 contestants who came closest to the actual answer, high or low, made up the team, starting with the closest and working its way out. And then once they made it to 5 contestants, and once they got their 5 contestants selected, the one contestant that was remaining went back in the contestant pool, and they would be considered for a future episode or a future game. Okay. The closest one became the team captain, and each other one became this, get to this position, yada yada. Okay. Now, if there was a tie, if somebody locked in the same answer, if you had 2 or more contestants who locked in the same answer or were locked in within the same range, the contestant who locked in their answers first won. They broke the tie. So this is where speed comes into play. Okay. So you had basically the Tower of Greed was basically 8 questions. First one was 25. Second one was 50. Third was 75, and the fourth was 100,000. Fifth question was worth $200,000. Sixth question was worth 500,000. Then it was $1 million, followed by $2 million. Okay. The team captain had a lot of responsibilities because they get to decide how far up the Tower of Greed they want to take the team, and they could accept or decline any answer that was given, especially on the first 4. Now, for the first 4 questions, each contestant was given a question, starting with the 25,000, starting with the contestant on the farthest right. Okay, from the house perspective, the one who was farthest over here, they got to do 25,000. Then it worked their way. Then, as they progressed up the tower, they would keep going to each other one. Most teams did very well during the first 4. They just had trouble in the second half. Okay, especially on the $200,000 question. Now, there would be times where contestants would miss the $100,000, and there would be like a time here and there where contestants would mess up on one of the earlier ones. And I think there was only one time in the show's history where somebody got the very first question wrong. And guess what? It was a question about Chuck Woolery. Okay. I'm going to play. So basically, here's the question. Which of the following shows did not feature Chuck Woolery as a regular host? Was it Love Connection, Scrabble, Wheel of Fortune, or Singled Out? Now, I'm going to let you hear this one.
I am pretty sure about this. Chuck, I've been following your career. Dennis. I'm going to say the one that you did not regularly host was Wheel of Fortune. Okay. Carol, would you accept or reject that answer? I'd have to agree.
Now, this contestant was pretty cocky, might I add. Okay?
Have to agree. Wheel of Fortune is one.
But let's see if he's right.
$25,000. Is it Wheel of Fortune? Well, the shortest, congratulations, the team that lasted the shortest of anybody in the history of Creed on my question. Of course, it would be me. I didn't do Singled Out. We're going to take a commercial. Wheel of Fortune?
Let's see that in an instant replay.
Well, the shortest, you have, congratulations, the team that lasted the shortest of anybody in the history of Creed on my question. Of course, it would be me. I did Wheel of Fortune. I didn't do Singled Out.
Chuck never did Singled Out, okay? Now, in the contestant's defense, he probably would never have seen Wheel of Fortune because now I was going to share this for the last feature, but basically, you are not gonna find reruns of Chuck Woolery's Wheel of Fortune on Game Show Network or Buzzer, or even on online streaming services. And I'm going to tell you why. Back when Chuck Woolery was hosting Wheel of Fortune, the networks, particularly NBC and ABC, were still in wiping practices, which basically meant for cost efficiencies or to keep costs down, they would take programs that they thought were just a one and done deal. Okay, nobody thought back in the 70s that there would be such a thing as cable TV or a use of reruns. So they would take these programs in the 60s and 70s, and then they would once they were done airing, and they went through the standards and the standards and practices, policies and stuff. They basically would wipe the tapes clean and then re-record them for future programming. Okay. Game shows and soap operas were the easiest targets, and I believe talk shows were right behind them too, because nobody thought that there would be such a thing. There would be no use for reruns. Okay. So a lot of shows have fallen victim to it. Chuck Woolery's Wheel of Fortune. The Chuck Woolery episodes of Wheel of Fortune, unfortunately, fell victim to it. Nearly all of his episodes are gone, and most of the episodes that do exist, they do exist in the forms of home recordings. So these are people that were lucky enough to have a VCR or VHS back in the late 70s, early 80s, and they recorded his episodes off the TV. And so many of these people, they want uploading those episodes on YouTube. Okay, so basically, like most of those episodes that are still out there are from home recordings. Okay, there is I think there's at least one or two master recordings that still exist. One of them wanted rerun in the Game Show Network in 2007, when in 2007 when they were paying tribute to Merv Griffin. They wanted airing some very rare game show episodes, especially Wheel of Fortune. One of them was from 1976, where a contestant, the puzzle was called Kill the Umpire, but the contestant guessed Kill the Vampire, and they thought it was My guess is they was saved because they were saving it for some kind of blooper show or something, and it basically escaped the. It just stayed in the vault and it escaped practices. Okay, okay. Now that's pretty much the one episode from Chuck Woolery that still exists, unless there's others hiding in some unknown vault in the NBC studios in beautiful downtown Burbank, is what Rhoda Martin's Laughing would call it. Okay, and hey, it's easily possible because look at the Hollywood Squares with Peter Marshall. For many years, people thought that all the Hollywood Squares episodes were gone, but they found a whole bunch of them in the NBC vault in the early 2000s when they were looking for other programs. Okay, so anything is possible. Okay, no promises though. Okay, but that's basically. But going back to greed, so basically, the contest you were given the first two questions. You have four possible answers to choose from. The next two questions, you had five different answers to choose from, and each of those four questions only had one correct answer. The contestant would select their answer. The contestant would choose. The captain would decide whether to accept or reject that answer. And if they chose to reject it, they could pick it. They could pick an answer of their own. Okay, and if they were correct, then that money would be split amongst their teammates, and they get to decide. And then their choice would be to whether or not they wanted to move on to the next question or to stay put. In most cases, like once you hit the $100,000 mark, like most teams decided to move forward. There will be a time here or there where they would choose to stop, especially starting with the $200,000 question. For the upper four questions, Chuck would basically he would give you the category to decide whether or not you wanted to move forward with that question, because the last four required four different answers, and you needed to rely on your teammates to come up with those answers. Okay, so okay, so for example, the 200,000. Okay, so before you make a decision, I'm going to give you the category for the $200,000 question. Category is the 1970s. How much do you know about the 1970s to go for $200,000? Okay, and if they choose to go for it, then each question from that point forward had a terminator, and basically they basically chose one contestant at random and decided whether or not they wanted to challenge another teammate for their position and their winnings. Okay, in order to sweeten the deal, Chuck offered the challenger $10,000 win or lose. Okay, so they would, if they chose to challenge, which they usually did, the two contestants would come over to the podium, would come over to this little podium in the center, and they would be like a one-question duel. Whoever ran in, they gave a correct answer, they won the duel, and they get to stay in the game. And the other one was out. Okay, and the other one was out of the game. Okay, but be careful, because if you ran in and you gave an incorrect answer, you were eliminated. Okay, so okay. So you moved on to the $200,000 question, and then you were given like six possible answers. Okay, so in this one would be, which four of the following six events took place in the year 1976? Okay, Jimmy Carter was elected president of the United States. America celebrated its bicentennial. Susan B. Anthony first appears on the U.S. dollar coin. Rocky, the first Rocky film, makes its theatrical debut in the movie theaters. Saturday Night Live, May 6th debut on television. Nadia Comaneci scores a perfect 10 at the Summer Olympics. Now, for making it this far, you guys are entitled to a freebie, and this eliminates one wrong answer between here and the $2 million question. Would you like to save it, or would you like to use it? Okay, so they did receive one lifeline, like on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. You received three lifelines. Ask the audience, phone a friend, in 50-50, and you can use it at any point during the time. Whereas on Greed, you got one freebie, and you only received it once you hit the $200,000 level, and it was only good on one question from that point forward. Okay, and of course, most teams used it on either the $200,000 or $500,000 question, because the questions did get harder as you progressed. Okay, Once you made up to the $1 million question, okay, or I'm going to go for foresight. So the team came up with its four answers. Then the team captain, they got to decide you want to lock in your four answers, or would you like to change any one answer. And if they want to change, they will get time to change it, and they can only change one. Okay, and they would go through the different things. Okay, different answers. They would select one answer here, one answer here, one answer here. If those three were correct, then Chuck would give them one last offer: 10% of the question's value, okay, which they can split amongst the team. Which in the first case would be $200,000, would be $20,000. They could split amongst the team and walk away, or they could give it back and hope that last answer is correct. If it was correct, then they would have $200,000 and they would have the opportunity to move forward. If it was wrong, or if any question was wrong at any point, the game was over and you lost everything. Okay. Now, if you want to get any question wrong, the only time a contestant actually won anything in the terms of when a team got a question wrong, and they got questions wrong quite often on the show, was anytime that somebody had the Terminator land on them and they decided to challenge their opponent. The only time that they actually won money. Okay. So 200,000 and 500,000 other questions were pretty much the same. When you got to the million, instead of being offered 10% of the thing, you were basically presented with a brand new car with a lot of cash. And it wasn't up to the team lead, but it was up to each individual contestant that was on there to decide whether or not they wanted to take that offer or go for the full pro or go for that $1 million. Okay. And when you get to the $2 million question, it basically is all individual. Like you decide whether you want to move forward with that $2 million question or if you want to stop and keep what you have. Okay. And each contestant made their own decision. The team captain did not make the decisions for the whole team. Each individual contestant did. Okay. Now, only one time in the show's history did we have somebody go for the $2 million question, and it was about the four most noticeable smells, based on a research study done by Harvard University. Okay, and the one contestant who actually went for the question, got 3 out of the 4 right. I think one of them was Vicks Vapor Rub. That's for sure. Okay, there was one question. There was one answer that he guessed tuna, and it was wrong, and the correct answer was chocolate. Okay, but let's see. Let me see what else we have here. Bear with me here. Okay. Okay. So here are the 9 answers he had to choose from: baby powder, peanut butter, mothballs, tuna, coffee, dry cat food, chocolate, cinnamon, or Vicks Vapor Rub. His answers were peanut butter, tuna, coffee, and Vicks Vapor Rub. Peanut butter, coffee, and Vicks Vapor Rub were all right. But tuna was wrong, and the correct answer was chocolate. Okay? This guy was such a risk taker, and it was so heartbreaking to see him lose it all. But that's the name of the game. Okay? So that was Chuck Woolery's. That's the first game show I ever actually saw for Chuck Woolery was Greed. Okay. So and there was for a brief time there was Super Greed, which the first 5 questions dollar values were the same. 6th question was worth $1 million. 7th question was worth $2 million, and the 8th question was worth $4 million. Nobody made it to that top question under the Super Greed format. Okay. So let me read you a brief reception for this. Greed received mixed critiques. At the beginning of the show's run, some critics saw Greed as more than a little bad attempt to capitalize on ABC's success with Millionaire. Scott D. Pierce of Deseret News called the series a ripoff of Millionaire, adding just how liberally Fox and Dick Clark Productions stole from the ABC hit is a bit of a shocker. Yeah, they tried to take it, do a twist on it. So, see. Somebody from the Buffalo News shared sentiment that Greed was little more than a Millionaire ripoff, although he conceded its Nielsen ratings were good by Fox's standards. Okay. Now, one thing I will say. See if I can find it here. All right. There were some notable contestants. Okay. So, one of the most notable contestants who appeared on the show was Curtis Warren, who scored huge back in the 1980s with Sale of the I think it was on the syndicated version of Sale of the Century in 1986. He scored huge on there. He came back in 1999 or in 2000. He did Greed. He was on that same team where that one contestant went for $2 million. Curtis stopped at the $1 million question after the team won the $1 million. And the three contestants were given the choice to whether or not they want to stop or move on. Curtis stopped. Okay. He also came back shortly afterwards. He did a $1 million moment in which he was basically given a $1 million question. He had 30 seconds to think about his answers and 10 seconds to lock them in. Questions would basically revolve around which four of the following 8 TV shows were spun into motion pictures. Okay. I think Hogan's Heroes was one of them. The Flintstones was one of them. The Beverly Hillbillies and The Fugitive, I think, were the 4 answers. And he actually won an additional $1 million. And he was the only one to actually win that $1 million moment. And at one point, Curtis Warren actually did become the highest winner in Greed's history. And he also, at one point, became the highest winner in U.S. game show history. When you take his show appearance on Greed, Sale of the Century, and an appearance on Win Benstein's Money, his total winnings came out to $1,546,988. His record was beaten shortly afterwards by David Legler on 21, who won $1,765,000, and these records were surpassed by Jeopardy contestants such as Ken Jennings, Brad Rutter, and James Holzhauer, all 3 of whom had exceeded those winning amounts. Okay? So that is Greed in a nutshell. Okay? So, okay. The last show, okay, the last major game show we did was Lingo. Okay? It wound up airing on the Game Show Network from 2002 to 2007. Okay. Let's see. Chuck Woolery's version. That's okay. So basically, you had 2 teams of 2. Each team had 2 contestants, and basically you got to solve 5-letter puzzles, right, or 5-letter words. You were given the first letter, and each contestant you took turns guessing like the 5-letter word, and if you determine, like, let's suppose like the first letter was an H. Okay, horse, HORSE. Beep 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 beep. And it would tell you if those letters were correct in the right place or if they were in the word but in the wrong place. Okay. And if you were able to solve it, you got 25 points, and then you had the choice, and then you had the chance to go underneath and scoop 2 balls. Okay, your job was to get it was kind of like bingo, except it was a letter version of bingo. Your job was to get 5 blue balls correctly based on your board. You had to get 5 across, up and down, across, or diagonally, and you got there was like 100 points or something for getting the lingo. So let's see, 25 points for each word. Each lingo is worth 50 points. If you hit one of the red balls, it was a stopper. The controller went over to the next team. They doubled the point values in the second round, and the team who had the highest score at the end of the second round, they got to go to the bonus board where they got to basically solve. They had to play bonus lingo. So bonus lingo, you had 2 minutes to solve as many 5-letter mystery words as possible. 2 letters were initially revealed in each word, one of which always was the first letter. If the team failed after 5 tries, the word would be revealed. You got $100 for each correct guessed word, up to $1,000 for 10 words. You were then given a lingo card, which revealed 13 numbers marked off. The hopper contained 12 balls, one for each uncovered space on the board, and the team drew a ball for each mystery word successfully guessed in the first half of bonus lingo. Forming a lingo won the team a $4,000 prize package consisting of an Argus digital camera, a Borders gift card, a Crompton watch, and a Cassiopeia EM500 Pocket PC, plus the money earned in the first half of lingo. Okay, so this show ran from 2002 to 2007. Now, during Chuck Woolery's time on lingo, he also did the 4th and 5th episodes of the Most Outrageous Game Show Moments with Bob Eubanks, where a lot of his they wind up scooping out a lot of embarrassing moments from Chuck Woolery. Okay, many of which were from Scrabble, and there was, of course, one from Lingo where one of the contestants said, "I love to dance, and probably the most interesting thing about me is that I've never had a cup of coffee." Well, I think perhaps you found it more interesting than I do, but nevertheless. So Chuck Woolery had no interest in what the contestant had to say, and that was pretty embarrassing. That's pretty embarrassing for a host to say, nevertheless. Okay, but anyway, his hosting duties on Lingo gave him a reality show deal for the Game Show Network called Chuck Woolery Naturally Stoned. They wound up doing 6 episodes. Oh my God! Like, what the hell was this doing on the Game Show Network? Out of all things, other than the fact that he was a game show host. Okay. So the first episode of Naturally Stoned, I have not seen this show in 21 years, okay? But I'll try to recap what some of the episodes were about. First episode was about his personal life, okay? Oh, here we go. Let's see if I can get the... All right, here is the 6th episode. So first episode is Behind the Chuck. Chuck's early life and career are summarized. His wife and kids also introduced to the viewers. Okay, one of my favorite moments out of that first episode. He's in the car with his daughter. You cannot go back in there. Why? Because I just spent $18 on something I get for $7.50 at Costco. I think it's like cottage cheese or something like that. Okay. A Tale of Two Chucks was the second episode. Chuck's desire to spend more time with his family is made difficult due to his hectic schedule with Lingo. So basically, they were doing behind the scenes. They did some behind the scenes work with. They did some behind the scenes work with Chuck Woolery while working on the set of Lingo, and then they basically showed like some of the things that were going on at home at his house in Utah, or Utah, Colorado, or something. Okay. And then, let's see. Third episode, Reinventing the Cheese Wheel. Chuck travels to a discount store in search of his favorite cottage cheese. Well, they couldn't reveal the actual name of the store for legal reasons, but you could definitely tell based on the imagery on the inside that they were in a Costco. Shopping at the competition, huh, Chuck Woolery? How dare you? But of course, it was very funny. He was looking around for his famous Newton cottage cheese or something like that. Okay. Episode 4, The Road to QVC. He goes on to QVC to sell a bass fishing lure product. Okay. His journey to his how the product works, how he created it, and how they land a deal to get the QVC and the behind the scenes of how they actually got on the show to promote the product. It's pretty great, interesting. And then fifth one was Chuck and the Common Man. His relationships with his Lingo co-worker. So they did another behind the scenes with Lingo. And the last one, the reality behind reality. So this episode was his issues with his marriage are brought to attention. They also did like some behind the scenes of work with like a lot of the other things that he had done in his career. Okay. Now, here is the reason why. So, I have no idea why they decided to do this, but Woolery was at first hesitant at being the show's subject. I wasn't in favor of it because I was looking at the Osbournes and Anna Nicole Smith, and I didn't have a life like these people at all. I personally think watching me is kind of like having lunch with Pat Boone. It isn't exactly rivet you to your chair. He later told the producers, maybe it will work if you edit it together and make it funny. Okay. So the show aired for 6 episodes, June 15th to July 27th of 2003. Okay. Now my guess is there are a lot of reality shows that were huge at the time, and I think the game show never wanted to cash in on that trend. With the Osbournes, was it MTV or something like that? But I know that the Anna Nicole Smith was on the E Network. Anna, Nicole, you're so outrageous. Jesus Christ! Now you got me doing that. Jesus. Okay. There's anything wrong with that. Oh my God. Okay. But in the long run, it was a pretty bad idea. Okay. It was an interesting concept, but it wasn't really the best thing to have happened. In fact, it was so bad, the show placed a strain on both Woolery's workload and his marriage and was met with generally negative reception. In fact, his marriage with his wife, Terry, came to an end shortly after the show came. They divorced in 2004. These guys were married for 19 years. And it took a reality show by the Game Show Network to end their marriage. Okay? So let's see. He also hosted a talk show called The Chuck Woolery Show. 65. This was back in 1991. Okay, so that only lasted for a few months. On April 21st, 2023, it was announced that Woolery would be featured in an upcoming 4-episode documentary by ABC News titled The Game Show Show, covering the history of game shows in America over the last 8 decades. The 4-part documentary premiered on May 10th, 2003. Okay, Chuck Woolery did co-star. He was featured in. He was being interviewed for his work, not on Wheel of Fortune, but also Love Connection. Okay, and this is where we got the information where he was broke and had to take the job of Love Connection for the money. Okay, so covering yada yada yada. Woolery later hosted 80s Quiz Show, a game show featured on trends and norms from the 1980s, which streamed on Fox Nation on June 7th, 2024. Okay? So from 2012 to 2014, Woolery hosted a nationwide syndicated radio commentary show called Save Us Chuck Woolery, which grew out of his YouTube videos. In 2014, the show became a long-format podcast and was retitled Blunt Force Truth. Before his death, the show could still be heard on about 60 radio stations across the country. With co-host Mark Young, Woolery expanded on his conservative political ideals and current events, often inviting guest excerpts to join the conversation. Okay. Now this is basically let's see. We will not discuss political stuff because it's a little controversial, okay? And I don't want to piss off any more people that are already pissed off. But let's talk briefly about his personal life, okay? Woolery was a Christian who volunteered in ministry. He was married 5 times and was the father of 5 children. Woolery and his first wife, Margaret Hayes, had 2 children together, Catherine and Chad. Chad was killed in a motorcycle accident in January of 1986. In 1972, he married actress Joanne Flug and had a daughter, Melissa. The two of them divorced in 1980. With third wife Terry Nelson, who was the adopted daughter of actor David Nelson, okay, who was born 1936, died 2011, the older brother of musician Ricky Nelson, okay, and she was also the granddaughter of Ozzie and Harriet Nelson. They had 2 sons, Michael and Sean, okay. In 2006, he married Kim Barnes. At the time of his death, it was reported that he was married to a woman named Christian. So, Kim Barnes, they divorced in 2016. Shortly afterwards, somewhere in the middle, there was Christian, Kristn, which he went marrying. Woolery spent his later years living in Horseshoe Bay, Texas, and died at home on November 23rd, 2024, at the age of 83. Okay. So, in addition to okay, in addition to his game show resume, some of the programs where he wound up making brief appearances: 1973 with Love American Style, the 1975 film The Treasure of Jamaica Reef. He did 227 in 1989, Cold Feet in 1989 himself with, as the host of Love Connection. Hey Hey, It's the Monkeys. He starred as the nightclub owner in that. He was also himself in Scrubs in 2004. Okay. He also, let's see, some of the other shows he wound up doing other than this were, see, he did also he guest starred on Biography in the episode Bob Barker when they were doing a Bob Barker's episode. I think they interviewed him for that. Um, he did a podcast from 2014 to 2024 called Blunt Force Truth. He guest interviewed in the Game Show in 2023 and 2024's 80s quiz show. Okay. Now I know that in 20, I think it was now for those of you who are married children fanatics. Okay. Chuck Woolery never appeared on Married. Chuck Woolery never made a guest appearance on Married Children, but there was a reference that he was referenced at least one time. Okay. And it was in season 7 when Bud he was a contestant on the dating game show You Can't Miss. Chuck Woolery was not the host, but it was Bill Maher that was the host. Okay, yep, the same piece of shit that was behind the show, politically incorrect. Yeah, that's the one that got canceled shortly after 9/11 when Bill Maher made some inappropriate anti-American comments at the exact wrong time. Yep, that was him, all right. Okay. Okay, so let's take a. Give me 1 second here. I want to see if I can get this reference here. So, married with children. All right. Okay. So in the episode, so basically in the episode, you can't miss. Okay. There is a quote saying, okay, where he calls the. I think Bill Maher was he played Adam. He was the host of the show. Okay. Let me see if I can find this real quick. Okay. Bear with me here. Hey, come on. Okay. Long and the short of it, Bud called Adam a poor man's Chuck Woolery. Okay. So basically, that is the one time where Chuck Woolery did get reference on Married Children. And Annabelle, I'm not sure if you're watching this or if you still subscribe to the channel. If you could find any other references to with Chuck Woolery on Married Children, insert them in the comments below. Okay? So that's pretty much the end of my tribute. Where I'm sorry I went a little longer than I expected it to, but at least you got to see how some of his legendary games were played. So Chuck Woolery did have a long-lasting legacy. He was a lot of people do not seem to understand, or they didn't realize that Chuck Woolery used to host Wheel of Fortune. Of course, they do have the right. It is understandable why people would not understand. It does make sense why people would not know that Chuck Woolery used to host Wheel of Fortune because most of his episodes no longer exist through the practice of tape erasure in the days of the back in the 70s and even the 80s. And even though NBC stopped, they probably stopped the wiping practice as a network by 1980. The practice was somehow still continuing throughout the mid 80s, okay? As evidenced by Wheel of Fortune, which somebody from Merv Griffin Enterprises publicly admitted that they continued to wipe daytime Wheel of Fortune through around 1985. And Reg Grundy, the people that were behind Sale of the Century, it is believed that they were engaged in wiping Sale of the Century all the way through 1986, 1987, which is probably making perfect sense here why um, only certain episodes of Sale of the Century have resurfaced since the show came to an end in 1989, particularly the 5-day-a-week syndicated version that aired from January 85 to the summer of 86, plus the final year of NBC daytime. Because we believe that everything else from that point, all the other episodes, are gone. Okay? Such a shame. Okay? Now, okay, so that's why you don't see Chuck Woolery's, but you do see there are a whole bunch of episodes on YouTube. So there are some clips that I have posted on my own channel from a long, long time ago. So feel free to take a look at those. Let's see, Scrabble. Okay, well, Love Connection has aired on the Game Show Network from time to time. It is no longer airing on there, but there are some episodes you can still watch on YouTube, of course. And then there are Scrabble. There are episodes that have surfaced on YouTube and stuff. It happens to be the other game show that has not. Yes, it did repeat on the USA Network, but it hasn't resurfaced since. So we don't know exactly what's going on with it. We don't know. Okay. And because it was produced by Reg Grundy, the same people that made Sale of the Century and the same ones that wind up wiping a good chunk of Sale of the Century, who knows if Scrabble made the same fate, or if they're just locked in a vault with cross ownership issues. Okay, we don't know why Scrabble hasn't resurfaced, but hopefully someday that will resurface one way or another. Greed resurfaced on the Game Show Network throughout the 2000s. I think it was the first game show since they lost the rights to The Price is Right in 2000. They started airing Greed started rerunning the Game Show Network in early 2002, and they would only air it on the weekends. And it made sense because they only did 44 episodes, and they're trying to extend the longevity of it, try to keep people to tune into it. So that was like the first time since they lost the rights to The Price is Right about 2 years prior, where they wanted it was like an hour-long game show. Okay, first hour-long game show they aired on the network since losing The Price is Right, and then they would have other hour-long game shows that would resurface on the network later on, including The Weakest Link, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, just to name and of course 21, just to name a few. Let's see, what else do we have? Lingo, that was made by the Game Show Network. The first season was done out in it was done in the Netherlands, and then everything that, and then yeah, yeah, I believe the first season was filmed out in the Netherlands, and the rest of it, and the remainder of his episodes were done out in Southern California. Okay, let's see. All of Chuck Woolery's episodes of Lingo are owned by the Game Show Network. They have air from time to time. I'm not sure if they're airing at the moment, but it is a really fun show to watch. And let's see. I believe Chuck Woolery did mention that there was one outtake that they wanted included in the promotions, where he considers Lingo as the most fun you can have with your clothes on. I love wisecracks like these. You can definitely tell Mr. Wildcat has no life. Okay. Yeah, there is a version that did come out in 2023, but it's not Chuck Wool. Chuck Woolery did not host the show. I think it's RuPaul. Okay. That one I have not seen, but it would be interesting to see it. Okay. One way or another. So, whether or not you love Chuck Woolery, he has had a huge impact on television throughout the last 50 years. He's also had quite a legendary music career as well. Okay, despite the fact that most of it was a flop. Okay, Chuck Woolery's legacy. Chuck Woolery will be. There's many ways that Chuck Woolery will be remembered for, but the one thing he will not be is forgotten. Okay. Yes, we did lose a huge chunk of Wheel of Fortune history with his passing, and pretty much the only things that are the only memories left of his version of Wheel of Fortune are the ones that are whether Susan Stanford has anything to say for. Okay, Chuck Woolery's not going to be able to share his experience, but if any contestants have that are still alive that appeared on his version that are still alive, they have something to say about it, or what anything that Susan Stanford would have something to say. That's pretty much the last of the memories that you would hear from his from the Wheel of Fortune. And as for the other shows, like it's pretty self-explanatory. It's pretty regretful. It was pretty sad to see Chuck Woolery leave Wheel of Fortune because, quite honestly, I would prefer to see him on there over Pat Sajak, especially after I've seen how the way Chuck Woolery has hosted Wheel of Fortune. It's such a shame that he wound up having to get into a pay dispute, and it's such a shame with the way Merv Griffin treated him too. Okay, Chuck Woolery. Okay, despite how you remember him personally, his legacy will live on, and especially for me, it would be from a game show perspective, especially when this is something I have watched nonstop for the last 20, 25 years. Okay, slowly watch most of his work, uh, whether it was on the Game Show Network or watching on YouTube. But I can tell you right now, Chuck Woolery has quickly become one of my personal favorites. And he will sorely be missed. And I do send special thoughts to his family, his children, and his wives. Okay? Hoping that they will recover from all this. Okay? Well, we don't have really much else to say. You guys we're pretty much out of time anyway. But until the next time we meet, Mr. Wildcat is reminding you all to be good, be careful, and behave. And remember, before you know it, we will be back in 2 and 2. Don't go away.